All right, I am fired up. I can't believe we are getting ready to rock and roll here with Don Manning. I am so excited to have Don here. Don's been a longtime friend of mine. Don has an amazing family, for sure. He's beat me by one. He's got 7 kids. 3 grandkids?
5 now.
5
Yeah,
grandkids.
we just keep, the tsunami is coming.
Oh my gosh, five grandkids. And when I thought about putting together this podcast, the very first person I thought of was Don Manning. Don has got his own podcast. He's got an amazing really ministry that he's put together called Crazy Cool Family. Mm-hmm. And Don and I go to church together. So Don, 5 grandkids, 7 kids, entrepreneur, church leader, you name it, he's doing it. So let's start by asking, Don, how do you embody God, grit, and goals in your life?
Man, it's interesting. It feels like it's always a learning experience. That I have been blessed with 7 kids and 4 sons-in-laws now, because I have 4 daughters and then 3 sons. And so the 4 daughters are married. So we have my oldest son's about to get married. We're in the grandchild stage, wonderful stage of life. But, I just look back, we're about to celebrate 32 years of marriage. And
all right.
So, in 32 years or, maybe 35 years in business. And, you would think maybe I've learned it, maybe I've gotten it down, but yet, this year, and even in particular, some things as we're moving some things in the ministry with business opportunities and things and having grandkids, it's like, I feel like this has been a big year of growth, and so it's like, I want to tell men, it's an adventure. It's always an adventure.
It doesn't stop.
It doesn't, well, it can, but don't let it.
Right, exactly. Keep it the adventure.
Yes, it's an adventure. Let's go. Let's keep moving forward. I feel like in some ways, I'm entering the third life.
Right.
That it's I'm 50.
Is that the grandpa life?
Well, I think it's also it's kind of I'm 59.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to ease out of business and into ministry. For me, some guys are looking at retirement at this time. I'm not a big retirement fan.
Yeah.
I want to keep going with purpose and energy in life till I die.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like, what is it? And maybe for these guys that are in their 30s and 40s, you're kind of in your second life. The first life being when you're raised and getting out of college and all that, and then you have I look at the second life of being. And it's like, what does this second life look like for you? And how are you going to have the vision, the goals? And for me, it's like it hadn't stopped.
Yeah.
It's the life with God is a continual adventure, and it's continually learning, and it's continually just experiencing.
Yeah, I've been telling my kids this because we've got kids that are between 20 and 30. So every 10 years, you're like a different person. You think. You're different from.
You're also going to be married to a different person. Think about that.
Yeah. So it's like the difference between being 10 and 20 is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's really good.
Right. And you think, well, that's it. Now I'm an adult. But no, the 20 to 30, huge difference.
Right.
30 to 40, huge difference. 40
right.
to 50. It's like every decade you're a new person. And it's just fascinating.
Well, and so along with that, let's think about this. What are you going to do that every stage is better than the last?
Yes.
So often you got the guy that peaked in high school, right?
Right.
Because he was a big football player and now.
Glory days.
Yes, exactly. But and I was talking to my 19-year-old son and I said, Maddox, you're a thinker. You're a kid that, and I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to be like me. Every stage of your life is going to get better. That when you're in your 20s, it's going to be better than when you're a teenager.
Right.
When you're in your 30s and you're married and having kids, you're going to make that better than when you were first married.
Yeah, that's great.
And so I love this stage of life. I can't wait for my 60s.
Yeah.
Because I'm launching into ministry more. I'm launching into grandkids. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so every stage can be better than the last.
That's so true. And it's different, but you integrate what you were, right? Right. So it becomes additive. And the Bible talks about, unless you're like a child, you can't enter the kingdom of God.
Well, and
right.
Yeah.
And so because I'm 60, I'm 61.
Yeah.
Right. But I still feel childlike.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't lose that, especially as guys.
Well, and I mean, think about this. I think that God, so again, vision, you're talking about goals, grit, God. I did it in backwards.
Yeah.
But God, but it's like, okay, when I was young in my married life and kid life, I remember this story of, not the story, but the actual reality of, I was probably 5 to 10 years into marriage, and I said, God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to go conquer the world? What are we going to do what's going to be my mission in life? And so let's go. And so do I want to start a business? Do I want to, we were young in our church. Do I want to, go into ministry? Every Christian man thinks that at some point. Do I want to go to work for the church? Do I want to go into politics? Do I want to get on the school board or whatever? And I was doing all this, thinking about all this vision stuff. And nothing it was like God was not in any of it.
Interesting.
And I was so frustrated. I'm like, okay, God, what do you want to do? And he literally, I can remember sitting at my desk in my house at the time and him saying, he says, Don, I'm not in any of that. And I'm like, well, God, maybe you could tell me what you are in.
What are you into?
Exactly. So maybe we could get this show moving. And he said, and I remember he said to me, and what I'm trying to get to the men here is that there's themes God puts in your life.
Right.
And what he said to me was, he said, and I had a lot of kids at the time, maybe 4 or 5. I didn't have 7 yet. But he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go deep with me. I want you to go deep with your family. And I want you to watch what I produce. And then I want you to tell people about it.
Wow.
And it was one of those like vision moments that, I never will forget.
Did you have kids at that point or where?
Oh, yeah. I'm talking like 4 or 5 kids at the time. And and I'm like,
that's all just minor.
And I had 4 girls. And so my thought I had 4 girls first. So my thought was, oh my goodness, how boring.
Yeah,
because God, what you want me to do is play babies. You want me to play dollhouse. I mean, how many times can I play dollhouse with these girls,
Yeah.
But I felt like that was the word of the Lord. Little did I know that seed was a vision eventually for a ministry that he wanted to create. So, when you're in your 30s and 40s, God is planting, and even in your teens and 20s, God's planting those seeds. And if you listen to him and you obey him, then he builds big oaks out of them eventually.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. I'm gonna bring this up because some of the people that listen, they don't understand when you say you heard from God. What is that to you? How does that manifest to you?
It's a great question. Could do a whole podcast on that, but I think just a few principles that happens. I think one is usually it's not my idea.
There you go.
I always say that whatever we feel. Our pastor calls it opposite theology. That there is a sense of if I'm angry, I need to forgive. If the voice of the Lord is going to be to forgive. If I am if I'm feeling selfish, the voice of the Lord is probably going to be generous. Those type things. I think it's usually the opposite of our feelings. A lot of times it feels like there is counsel that lines up with it. That it is, and there are events moving. In your life that are either people talking to you or certain things that line up with it as well. That's another reason. And it's just a sense of, I've never heard an audible voice from God. It's more of a sense of this is where that he is speaking and it lines up with scripture. It's something that is biblical and usually my wife agrees.
So that's really good. I've wrestled with this and we're going to get off this, but I want to say one thing because for me, God sounds like me in my own head, and he's taking a different point of view than I've had, and it is biblically based. And it's like you said, it's like...
The other thing is it's encouraging. God is never going... Suzanne...
It's good.
There's something in our book about that where Suzanne was talking to Macy, our daughter, and she was just saying, how do I hear God's voice? And Suzanne says, when the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. The devil prowls like a roaring lion seeking to devour. So when you're hearing those voices in your head that are discouraging, that are not dreaming, God took Moses on an adventure.
Right.
God took David on an adventure. God took, Peter, all of it. It wasn't fun all the time.
Yeah.
But it is an adventure. And when
God's not telling you to sit on the couch, play video games, do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and he's going to tell you, he's going to help you to dream. He's going to help you. He's going to say, I got you.
Yeah.
He's going to say, that you're I believe in you, those type things. Those are what I think are all voices from the Lord.
That's good. Yeah, thanks for that. So I just want to talk for a second. 7 kids. Clearly, you know a thing or two about grit. And so share a snapshot maybe of a typical day in the Manning house. I know it's a little bit different now, but
very different now.
maybe go back to maybe a time when you were in your 30s, 40s. What were days looking like for you then?
Well, one of the things that was, again, I really like for men at their 30s and 40s and their young to figure out the values that they want to. What's a value? It's something that's important to you. So what are the themes? What are you going for in your house? And Suzanne and I talked about, my wife Suzanne, we talked about it a lot, just what are our values in our home? What are our priorities and things? Because with 7 kids, you had to think about, and for us, for example, one of the things we did a lot was sports. Mm. And so I love sports. I think they're great. I think they teach a lot. In our world today, there's not a lot of, in some worlds there is a lot of adversity, but in some of because we go to the grocery store and get everything we want, and we have Netflix, and we have all these things that we can turn on and entertain and everything. We have phones and all this stuff.
Instant gratification everywhere.
Yes. I mean, there is not as much adversity in general as there was in our world. In some ways, there's anxiousness and depression and all those things that are in our minds, but outside, we go get gas and everything is done for us. We have air conditioning, and so so I think sports really gives us some adversity that is, and you learn to be challenged, and you learn, we're not going out and learning to sword fight so we can go to war anymore,
right.
And so those things I love sports. And so really, that's a whole nother podcast, but I think there's a balance with it. And so, for example, I coached a kids youth basketball team for 23 years in a row.
Wow.
I mean,
23 years.
Well, from the time my first daughter was 6 to the time my last son was 12.
There you go.
So that was about 23 years, and every year, and some years, so for me, I love to coach sports. I love to coach youth sport. I didn't get up into the select or whatever because it was too much time with the 7 kids, so I had to make a choice.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, it was baseball season. And we had 2 or 3 kids playing 2 or 3 of my boys were playing baseball, or I had 3 or 4 girls playing basketball. And so we were going. We were just, I mean, there was a lot of going. I remember being like December, January, February in the middle of basketball season. And every time about January 15th, my wife and I would look at each other and go, what have we done? What have we done? I mean, this is crazy because we are just going everywhere.
We had a 1-sport rule.
Yes, we did too.
Okay.
Yeah, we absolutely
can only play 1 sport.
Yeah, it was necessity because you couldn't do it. And I think that so often we get so much into youth sports having to be so year round and things, and I don't know that that's really necessary. But there was I just remember there was a lot of activity. But in the meantime, we stayed faithful to our local church. So that created busyness. We were super involved in the children's ministry. That's what we chose. I think so often what I remember back is we picked certain rocks that we, what I mean by, you remember the illustration of you put the rocks in first and then you can put the sand in.
Time management.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we would try to choose our rocks. Okay. Yes, we're going to do basketball. Okay.
The big important things.
Yes, or we're going to do church. Yep. We're going to do these things, and that way we know, okay, this fits in the box.
Yep.
And now I'm changing analogies, but I mean, it fits in the box or it doesn't, and it kind of helped us make decisions on what we were going to do. It was really busy.
It's a prioritization. Crazy.
But and it was a lot of communication and a lot of like for example, create a lot of car rides. A lot of times with the kids in the car, you learn to gain time when you could. And like, for example, one of the things I did, I remember is I had to get super efficient at work because I didn't have time to spend all day. I didn't have time to spend till 8 o'clock at work. I needed to be gone at 5:30. Well, if I was going to be gone at 5:30, I had a big job. I had a career, everything. And so
balancing that work-life balance.
Yes. And really just getting serious about it and not playing around because there was a lot of things going on.
Yeah. I think you see this sometimes is I want to spend time with my family. So I'm going to work really hard so I can spend time with my family later.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I talked about this a long time ago of a decision that you had to make, a conscious decision that you made in terms of your career to say, I'm just, there's a path I could go down, but I'm choosing my family over that path.
I'm amazed you remembered that. But yeah, it's true. I mean, with 7 kids, I think that some people ask me a lot, how many kids should we have? And I'm like, be careful because, it really does. I mean, a big family has, it's such, I love having a big family.
Let's get it right. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
It is.
But it's may not be for everybody.
Right.
Because there's a certain level of commitment you need to do. And I talked to that, so, there's like a tipping point of about 3 or 4 kids that when you get to 5, 6, 7, it multiplies what's happening, and you know this. But but as I saw that we were potentially, we never meant to have 7 kids. It was just like we just kept having one more.
Yeah,
and
that's why people ask me, why do you have 6 kids? Because I said, I don't want 7. That's why I have 6.
Yeah. We always said that 7's the number of completion because once we got to 7, it's biblical, and we said, hey, but it was really once I realized we were going to have a large family, and I realized the commitment I wanted to make to family.
Yeah.
Then I said, you know what? I can't have a career that's going to be consuming. I have to scale back my career a little bit and choose positions that are going to choose whatever that was, positions, business, whatever it was, that I could do it in the box that needed to fit in. And honestly, I absolutely believe, now I may have wrecked my family in the process, but I've watched some of the career paths that my friends went down. I believe that I could have made a lot more money. I really do. And sometimes the enemy wants to hit me with that and go, man, you could have just, you could have just you could have just knocked it out of the park if you'd done this or this or whatever.
You go in someone else's house and you're like, you could have had this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really does. But then I say, God brings me back to my family and say, yeah, I think you made a pretty good choice. And in the meantime, I've always provided for you, always blessed you. It's all relative. And, but yeah, just making those choices and what we talk about a lot with men is pick your rocks, because, and even whether that be in business or in what sports your kids are going to play or whatever, because once you pick it, most of us are going to finish the job well. Yep. And if we pick a job that's really, really demanding, we're going to go finish. We're going to go do that.
That's it. If you're going to have the grit and the grind,
yes,
and make sure you're on.
But choose it beforehand.
The right goal.
But yeah, exactly. What's your vision, and and how does it fit in with your family? Because once you pick it, then go for it. It's like, and Suzanne and I would have these discussions about things, and I would be like, okay, we're going to do, and my wife is not as much of a planner, and I mean she's much more relational, much more in the moment in a very good way. I am much more of, we got to think about the big picture and stuff, but we would have these discussions.
I'm way more like Suzanne.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I'm surprised at that actually, but we would say, okay, what are we going to do? And then I would want to make sure that we have agreement on that, because then when we get when it gets hard, then we got to say, you know what, we committed to that, and we got to rethink that. But if you don't pick the rocks well in the front end, you get crushed on the back end.
For sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. How do you want to instill grit in your kids?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the best thing, it's interesting because we are very relational parents. So we're not, let me give you an example. So my youngest child, McCade, is a football player. And this was a few years ago. And he was, and I wanted him to work hard in football. Mm-hmm. I want, if you're going to play football, let's go to work. Let's be our best. Let's get the best football experience we can. Let's don't be lazy. Let's don't be, whatever. So I had him with a trainer. And I was paying the trainer a lot of money to teach him to be a football player, teach him all the, things they needed to do, many things. I didn't know how to teach. I could teach him how to play basketball, not football. And so, I wanted to invest in him. And so, but I was concerned that he wasn't taking it seriously. He was 9th grade and, typical little.
I think every dad who has a son.
Yeah. I mean, he's just, and I'm looking at him, I'm going, you're a punk. I mean, come on, you're just
suck it up.
So yeah, let's go have passion. Let's go get it.
Yeah.
And so we were driving to the training one day, and I had a large check that because I was writing several sessions, I paid for like 8 months.
Oh, wow.
So I had the check with me, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to pay for it all at one time. And I gave him the envelope, and I said, open up that check, open up that envelope. And he looked at it, and he's like, wow, that's a lot of money. And I said, you're worth it.
Mm.
You are worth every dollar of that.
Wow.
I want to invest in you. I believe in you. I believe that you're going to do great things. I said, now you got to decide. I said, I'm never going to be that dad that's on you all. Did you do your workout? Did you do your workout? Did you do your workout?
Yeah,
get over there, get in there, do your
exhausting.
workout. Come on. What'd you do today? What'd you do today? What'd you do today? What'd you do? Why didn't you do this? I said, I'm never going to be that dad. Not any good at it, for one. It's exhausting, like you're saying. But I said, I believe that if I invest in you, that you need to invest in you too.
Mm.
And you know what? It took a couple of months. Today, he's a junior. He's a hard-working football player.
Nice.
And he does everything he's supposed to do. And it was...
a lot of people will do that. They won't talk about that up front. And then they're going to be pissed off on the back end.
Yeah.
Like, I did this for you. Why aren't you? Right?
Yeah.
And when you set it up properly like that, and you gave him I see in you someone worth investing in.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I don't even remember the original question, but I think
Grit, installing grit into your family.
Well, so I think we do it through inspiration.
Yeah.
And also the other thing, so I would say two things. One of them is be an inspiring parent, because you want it, you have two choices. I'm going to get to my other point in a minute. You have two choices. You can either motivate out of inspiration, or you can motivate out of fear.
Yes.
So if you motivate from fear, then they will do it when you're looking. When you motivate from inspiration, it's harder, and it takes a lot of patience and a lot of God, because it's frustrating. But when they do it, then they buy into it themselves.
Yeah, they own it. Yeah.
They own it, and now they believe in it.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is super important. So I would say inspiration is one word for instilling grit in your kids. Example is the other. So when I set my kids down, so I'm a businessman. I'm in the real estate, been in the real estate business for the last 15, 20 years, and do a lot of different business interests. My kids have always known, but they've always known I was in the real estate business or whatever. But what I did was I sat down all my boys in probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I said, if I die, this is everything that's going on in my life right now. And I just kind of did it as an estate planning deal. Like, if I were, your mom doesn't know everything, here's what I'm doing.
What?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but she's not a financial person. She doesn't,
Gotcha.
but she, I said, your mom doesn't, want to be a part of this, but you're a man, you're going to lead your family. I want you to know what's going on. And I did it just for really to help manage that whole process if something were to happen to me. But also what I didn't realize would come out of it is they were like, wow, we had no idea what you did. And we had no idea all the,
so funny.
And it started this respect transition.
You set all this up.
That we, Dad, wow, you're, And for me, I don't know, the method doesn't matter. What is, that's an example of being an example.
Yeah.
How do you, maybe it's that you're a big hunter and you go out and prepare and you do the things and there's guys I know that have no every deer in their whole field they're in or whatever, because they look at it and stuff. Well, what are you doing to involve your sons in that? They see you working hard. It doesn't matter what you work hard at.
Yeah.
Are they? Are you giving the example of working hard? If you want your kids to have grit, do you have grit?
Yeah, exactly.
And are you showing them the example of grit?
Yeah, and it not at them, right? It's like for yourself. That's really good.
So I would say, going back to that, it's just example and inspiration. I feel like that most dads try to do it through lecturing and fear, and it works to some. I mean, that is like it is.
It's the quick fix.
It's quick, and it's kind of a secondary. It's a less than ideal way to do it. You know, I love to teach men. That's what we do in our ministry, Crazy Cool Families. We teach parents how to become more inspiring parents and more encouraging parents, because, you know, we're just doing damage to our relationships unknowingly. The parents we talk to, dads that are out there that we're talking to today, you love your kids. You know, you're not going, well, I don't care about my kids. You know, you
right.
but yet, so here's think about this. You're talking about grit and things like that. You know, you got dads who love their kids, but yet are not being effective with the relationship, with teaching the grit. With every dad I talk to is like, I don't know how to get, you know, I was the same way. I had 4 daughters. I was like, I have no idea how to reach these girls. What do I do? You know, and yet, you know, it's not because I don't care.
Yeah.
It's not because I don't love them.
Just don't have the handles. Like, what?
Don't know. Yeah, exactly.
I'll be nice.
Yeah. Yes.
Be nice. Well, I'm nice to them. I'm providing for them.
And actually what happens is that they nice is one way, anger's another way, or distance is another way. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to go to the office. I'm just going to go hunting. I'm just going to go play golf.
Hide out. Yeah.
Yes, because I don't get, you know, what to do with that.
Yeah, good stuff. Great advice. So I'm going to shift gears here for a second, and we're going to dive back into the God element here. And I want to hear you, because I know you've done a lot of work in this area, but how do you incorporate God into your family?
Well, it's funny. I used to be, I say don't do family Bible studies, because I tried those and they were just horrible. I would try to get my family up at like 6 o'clock in the morning or 7, you know, and my wife is like the worst, you know, participant in the whole deal, and nobody wants, because she hates getting up, and, you know, and I was like, so, you know, I have a blog I do about, one of my blog posts is how not to do a family Bible study, because I did them all wrong. And it was, and I say, I don't blame the daughters or my wife or anything. I blame me, because it was like, I was trying too hard, basically. And so, one of the things that I really teach a lot to men is, we build God into our family along the way. And I love the word. And if you look at Deuteronomy, I think it's 6, it says, you know, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It says, you know, when you do it along the way, when they lie down, when they rise up, you know, when you're walking along the field, you know, it's at dinner
ever
time.
Present.
And I think one of the things that we did, we talk about in our family having God conversations. And that is something that we've done a lot in our lives. I tell men a lot, it's not about your family Bible studies. That's just a joke I use. But it's more about just sharing God along the way in your life. So, you know, are you reading a scripture? Well, you know, what do you talk about? How can you talk about that scripture with your kids? Or you know, when you ask a question, you know, you might ask, man, where do you think God is in that? And start a God conversation, not heavy-handed but when God conversations, back up. If God is in our lives, then our conversations should be of God. If God is having an influence in our lives, then we should talk about things in terms of what God is doing, where he's working. It doesn't mean we don't talk about the Cowboys or we don't talk about whatever, but you know, if we never talk about God, is God really working in our lives?
Yeah, good point.
It's not just some compartment over here. Yeah. He's in everything. He's in our work. So, you know, for example, you know, I might, and then how we incorporate. So maybe when I came home, I would say, you know what, man, I'm having a real issue with this employee at work. You know, I'm really struggling. I may have to let her go or something like that. Or I may have to, or there's a conflict. I can't really feel like that. Would you pray? I just would like for us to pray about that, because I really would love to see where God's working and how I'm supposed to handle it or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, things like that where and over time, what happens is now when our kids are together, they have God conversations. You know, you're instilling a culture.
Yeah.
And so you're instilling the value. One of our values is we want to talk about God in our family.
That's good.
And so therefore we do it along the way.
So just praying at dinner isn't doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well, I mean, and that's good too.
That's a piece of it.
That's a piece of it. But
Yeah.
but so many times we think it's got to be so formal. We
Yeah.
have to pray at
Bible
dinner, and we
study.
have to get everybody around a family dinner, and we have to talk about these things, and we have to study. And those are good too. Like, for example, our church has a reading plan,
Yeah.
you know, that we're reading the New Testament throughout the year. So many families are using that to, hey, let's all read the reading plan together. And so their structure is good. I just think that in so many ways, sometimes either one, we don't have anything we're doing, or we try to put too much structure into it. And I just say, hey, let's just do it along the way.
Yeah.
Let's have God
more
be a part
natural
of
that way.
Exactly. And then your kids, it's not threatening.
Yep.
You know, for example, teenagers invariably, when they start to be 11, 12, whatever, they start to ask questions about God. Is God real? Is
Yeah.
God, you know, why if God's real, why did that couple get a divorce, you know, that we love so much or whatever?
Yeah.
And parents start to freak out. And they start to go into lecture mode. Well, hey, you know, look at the Bible here. It's all good, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's like this tone.
Yeah.
And the kid's like, wow, okay, note to self, don't go there.
Don't go there.
Yeah. And so, but instead it's like, what if we welcome the questions?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great question. What do you think about that? Who do you think God is? And why? Well, you know, I don't know. I mean, well, okay, would you you like to explore it together, or would you, things like that?
Yeah. That's good. One of the you're reminding me of something, and it's such gold what you just said. I think so often we want to get our message across, and I remember having a conversation with one of my daughters, and I said, "Do you want to know my thoughts on that?" And she said, "No," and I said, "Okay."
Wow.
Right? Because we're fix-it guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what you did with that is you let your son or your daughter own that question.
Yeah.
Right. And so often we want to jump in and be the answer person, but through questioning, you're actually opening their mind to it.
Well, and actually what you just said is what's our goal? I mean, dads, hey, think about this, Dad. What's your goal? You want your kid to own their belief.
Yes.
So
there comes that time, right?
You want them, and they can own their beliefs obviously it's age appropriate, but I mean, I can have my 7-year-old kid own cleaning up the room.
Yes.
I got to try. It takes a lot of training. It's the harder way to do it.
Yep.
But it's
that inspiration.
At the end of Matthew 10, Jesus says, "Take up your cross and follow me." He says, and you think about the cross. It's heavy. It's big.
It's the burden.
It is. But then at the end of Matthew 11, he says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, dads, you know what? If you'll take on the burden, if you'll take on the cross, and you'll take on the hard things of doing things God's ways, you will find, I tell people all the time, I got 7 kids, I got 4 sons-in-laws, I got 5 grandkids. Family's the easiest thing I do every day. Why? Because the relationships are good.
Yeah.
I know people, I know where their heart is, I know where their heart is with God. There's trust. And those are things, that's picking up your cross.
Yeah.
And that's the grit, doing the hard things in relationships and learning about how to do. I'm absolutely convinced that 32 years into this and teaching thousands of dads and parents through our ministry, 95% of us don't have a clue how to do relationships in our family.
Wow.
I mean,
that's a staggering number.
Well, I didn't study. I mean, it's not. It's
no, but
it's,
I mean,
I'm
it's
just.
like,
But I mean, I mean.
Yeah, but that's been your experience.
My experience is, and when I mean not knowing how to do them well.
Yeah.
And therefore the relationships stay surface. There are wounds. Think about us. We all have parent wounds, right? We all have things that and our parents did their very best, but there's things that happen. Well, now we're the guys causing those wounds.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, we all grew up poor. We all had to walk uphill both ways to school.
And you know, one of my missions is I really, you know, I feel like with Crazy Cool Family, there's two things we do. One of them is we help parents, and in this case, dads, cast vision. So many dads, for example, I say, man, you got a vision for your life? Yeah, I got a vision for my life. You got a vision for your career? Yeah, I know where I want my career. You got a vision for your family? Like, really? Do I really have? I mean, is that maybe that's my wife's job? She takes care of the family,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
so important.
no. But also, I find that so many men really don't have a strong sense of how to do relationships, and so they either get frustrated with those relationships, whether that be their 3-year-old or their teenager, or their wife, and or they withdraw.
Guys, this is so important to understand because we're gonna dive into goals. And if you don't have a goal of having relationships with your family, you're going to be missing one of the most foundational things. And Don, I know you're an expert in this kind of relationship building with each of the kids, how all of that works.
Well, and one of the things I tell guys a lot is watch your wife, because usually she's better relationally than you are.
Right.
You know, and that's one of the things I did.
So true.
I started watching my wife, and I tell guys all the time, if you'll become a student of your wife instead of her critic, you'll be amazed what you learn about family. And so, but let me give you, I think, and other thing I'll tell guys a lot is that I believe, it has manifested itself in my life. I've seen it manifest itself in hundreds and thousands of other families, that other than your salvation, so other than your salvation and discipleship, the primary relationship we have is with God. Always, always, always.
Yep.
Other than that, the most important thing you will do in life is learn how to do your family relationships. And it's not me that said that. I really feel like Jesus said that in Matthew 22. They said, what's most important? He said, love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and mind.
Yep.
And then love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? Who's your most important neighbor?
They're in my house.
That's right. And yet, those are the people that we have the most conflict with, that we treat the worst many times,
So
that
true.
we lecture the most, that we talk down to the most. And I'm like, okay. And again, you know, if I were to say, you know, Mike, do you love your kids?
Of course.
Exactly. And if I ask if there were 100 men in this room that are listening to this
Raise your
podcast,
hand,
we would say, do you love your kids? Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Then let's learn how to relate to them. You know, I explained this with men a lot, and I say, have you ever seen a Rubik's Cube? And, you know, and everybody says, yes, I've seen a Rubik's Cube. I said, Rubik's Cube's been out since 1974. It's one of the most known toys, mazes, that, you know, whatever, puzzles that's ever been known. I said, how many of you can solve a Rubik's Cube?
Not me.
Yeah, there's like 5%, I think, people that do it.
Yeah.
That know it, maybe less. And I'm like, okay. And so I was watching my boys, and I've seen a Rubik's Cube forever. And what happens is when I try to solve it, usually I kind of get the surface done, maybe the white is done, but then I try to get any depth, and it's like, wow, this is, okay, no way. And so two things happen. One of two things happen. Either one, I get frustrated with it, and I'm angry that I'm not smart enough to do that.
Yes.
And or I set it aside and I don't do it anymore. And I'm like, and then one day I see my boys and they are solving a Rubik's Cube. They've looked it up on YouTube and they've figured out how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And so I'm like, I want to do that. I want to solve a Rubik's Cube. I want you to show me how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And my boys, it's so funny when they know something that you don't, how condescending they are. I mean, it's like, okay,
Got
Dad.
one up on you.
Yeah, Dad, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Dad, I'm not sure you can do this, but we're going to try to teach you, okay? And it's all about algorithms, Dad. It's all about, everything's algorithms. I'm like, what in the heck's an algorithm? You know, we're going back to 8th grade algebra here. You know, what is it? They said, oh, Dad, it's just, you know, an algorithm is a set of instructions. And I'm like, and it was true. What they were saying was true. Their tone of voice didn't really inspire me, but it was so they. And what was true is that, you know, when I solve a Rubik's Cube, there's multiple ways to solve one, but in the way they showed me, there's 8 different algorithms that you use. And basically what an algorithm was is a series of instructions. And so you look at the cube a certain way, and then you apply the algorithm, and then you start to build. And so first you build the top, and then you build it down in depth as you go. And then finally after you do the 8 algorithms, you solve the Rubik's Cube. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what a great analogy for men. Everybody understands that. And actually, if I'm live, I wish I had it with me here, and if you were looking at it on a camera, but I show them as I solve it, as I do it, and I show them how we build depth in the cube as you solve the algorithm. I'm like, that's what I learned to do. That was so important. I'm learning the algorithms, and the complexity of relationships is different than the complexity of a cube. But it's a Rubik's Cube. But it's really what's happened is there are algorithms. There are, you look at the relationship and you apply God-inspired algorithms, sets of things that we do in order to learn how to do family relationships. And and the church overall, and even our internet and all the things we have, they do a really good job of discipleship in the church in general. But in terms of marriage and parenting, we really don't get trained in how God's word shows us how to do the algorithms of family relationships, how to really connect at a deep level.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's, because we want some step-by-step instructions, right?
So, and really what it comes down to is there are certain, and with a Rubik's Cube, there's certain right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And with relationships, it's more thematic. So,
what do you mean?
Well, for example, I just told we were talking about how do you put grit into your kids? Yeah. Well, you do it through example and inspiration, not fears and lectures. Okay, that's a belief change. I'm going to apply. So what I do is I look at my 16-year-old son, let's say, or a 14-year-old daughter or whatever, and I'm like, okay, here's a situation, just like the cube presents itself. How am I going to apply the thematic, the principle, the value of inspiration and, an example into this rather than lecture? I change my beliefs, and I'm like, oh, now I'm going to figure out a way to be inspiring. Yeah. Rather than tell them who they're not, I'm going to tell them who they are. Okay. And so that's an example of an algorithm, if you will. It's a different way to do things. It's a set, and then, okay, now how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to say, honey, I know that you're struggling with this class, but I really believe you can do it. And then what are some ways, and you're going to ask questions, for example, what are some ways you think that we can get to the goal of making an A in this class? I don't know, Dad, there's no way. Well, let's think about it a little more, rather than, why aren't you
buckle down?
Get together. Why don't you work hard? You're never going to amount to anything in life if you don't work hard. And, if you don't make an A in this class, you're not going to get in college, and, just blah, 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 blah. Right. So we change our algorithms. We change the depth of our relationship. We inspire that child to be a learner instead of telling them what they're not.
That's good. Yeah. I see in you. You're more than a conqueror. Like, we're going to get through this. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm here for you. Yeah.
I mean, another algorithm is, if you will, all our children are created unique, so we parent them differently.
That's really good.
And so therefore, we look into their hearts, and and they're going to be different at different ages. And, I was just writing a blog the other day about teaching your children to clean their room. Some children are neat freaks. Some children are relationship freaks. Okay, what standards are you going to have for room cleaning based on those two different kids? And so when relationship and connection is and you learn the algorithms of relationships, again, I think it's the second most important thing we do in life because these people are so important to us. Our family is important to us, and yet most men know more. This will be convicting, but let's say it anyway. Know more about their hunting lease and the Cowboys roster than they know about how to reach the hearts of their children. I'm not talking. And it's not that those things are horrible. I mean, I know the Cowboys
No, but
roster.
it's just like, what are we spending our time doing?
As this podcast is being recorded, I'm looking at the end of the baseball season and how things are going, and I know everything the Rangers are doing. But also, let's learn. I'm saying that let's also learn some important things about how to do relationships, because there are, just like that Rubik's Cube. I show men like a broken cube with not broken, but I mean just with all the colors in it. Just all messed up.
Yep.
And then I show them a completed cube. And it's like, which one do you want for your, if you had to choose? Most men are frustrated and they don't know how to solve, and their relationships look like this with their kids and with their wives. What if your relationships look like this? And I show them a completed cube, and everybody's like, I want that. Just like just like I told my boys, I want to know how to solve that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a way to do it. And God shows us. It doesn't mean it's easy. I had to practice. It took me weeks to learn it, and and I have to keep in practice, otherwise I forget it and all the things. But that happens with relationships too.
So what, I want to get practical here for a second, because this is good stuff. So let's say, how does that relationship evolve, say from preteen to teenager? What would you say to a dad who's saying, I'm on board. I want to be building these relationships. How do I get started in this?
Yeah. Well, one of them is that it is a journey. I say that excuse me, you don't learn to be a parent in a weekend. You learn to be a parent over months and years. So get ready for a journey. I tell dads all the time. I said, I wish you could have seen me at a 5-year dad. You'd be like, dude, how did you ever raise
funny,
7 kids that were anywhere close? But, I went on a journey and of learning, and now I know a lot more today than I did 25 years ago. So first of all, it is learning relationships is a journey that you do, but it really doesn't take that much time. What I'm saying is that because what happens is we pick up concepts, we pick up beliefs, and then we have to go apply those beliefs in the relationships. So it's not something, it's kind of like thinking about, Jesus said, be a forgiving person. Okay. He said, forgive. You don't have to read a lot of scriptures to know that Jesus said, forgive. Yep. But applying forgiveness in our lives takes months and years. We have to change our belief system. We have to believe in forgiving, and then we have to see it happen, and then we have to exercise it. But over time, if we keep doing it, we see the value of it, and we become a forgiving person. So, so it takes time, but it takes time, like years, to develop. But it doesn't take a lot of time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so the key is just getting these concepts and then starting to apply them. And so, how does that practically work? For example, people will come to our Crazy Cool Family material, and they will say, and so we'll give them, for example, encourage extravagantly and correct carefully. 5 words. Now, again, you may want to hear that again.
Say it again, because
encourage extravagantly and correct carefully. So we want to. Most people are too critical and not encouraging enough to their kids. Okay, everybody says that. Okay. How do we flip that? Well, we just learned to, and Scripture backs it up. Hebrews 3:13 says, encourage one another daily as long as it's called today, so that none of you will be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Literally, we teach that encouragement opens up the heart, and we're careful. There's another scripture, I don't have it memorized, but it talks about just careful instruction, not being careless with our instruction. And so, that's all that dad needs. Now you got to start practicing. Okay, now let's go practice being encouraging.
Yeah, those are.
Our pastor says when you are bringing hope into the room, you will have the most influence. Okay, let's practice bringing hope into the room instead of what we normally bring into the room.
Yeah.
Why is this
thunder?
This place is a mess. Oh my goodness. Instead, what if you say, "Wow, man, I'm so glad to see you guys. I'm so glad you're in our family." Whatever it is, man, this is going to be a great day. And that is, so we keep, and we're going to fail at that again, because we're going to get mad and we're going to do whatever. But it's like we've started to think about changing our belief system and we started to believe in how we're going to inspire. We're going to, things like that.
That's really good. I'm going to draw a parallel here, because really resonates with something I've been thinking about lately, and that is we've got God the Father and Jesus the Son and the Holy Spirit, right? So I think about God as the greatest good, but I also think about him kind of setting the standard, right? The law. And because the law is there, as dads, we have rules,
Right.
right? And there's standards. And so when I hear you talk, I think about God is good and he's for us, and yet there are these standards. And when we look at the Old Testament, we think, well, there's just a lot of punishment and there's a lot of wrath and there's all of that. And then Christ comes and he says, you are forgiven, right? And so it's kind of this balance between order, because we don't want chaos,
Right.
and grace. And I think we all kind of wrestle with those things. And when I hear you say, encourage extravagantly, and is it
Correct.
correct? Yeah, you don't say criticize, you say
Yeah.
correct carefully. And then you talked about forgiveness. And so Christ came that we might offer grace, right? And so he's our example, that we should give our children the grace. And yet there still are standards,
Right.
right?
Yeah. So often when I talk about, and notice we said, you brought it up, but we say correct carefully because correction is good.
Yeah.
The scripture tells us to correct. Hebrews says that God disciplines those he loves.
Right.
It also says we can approach his throne of grace with confidence. You know, so often I ask dads, what's your throne look like?
Mm.
You know, is it a throne your kids can approach with confidence, or do they approach it with fear? And it's not about, and another thing I tell dads a lot is, I'll promise you, I'll bet my standards for my kids are as high or higher than yours.
Mm.
I believe God gives us a different way to achieve those standards. And the standards for my kids are, do they love the Lord?
Yeah.
Are they making wise decisions? Are they hearing God's voice? Those are higher standards than are they making an A on that test?
For sure.
You know,
That's good.
and let's think about what's our vision? You know, I had to think about that. You know, it's like I want great kids. What do great kids look like?
Right.
What is that really? My wife and I talked about it. We said we really want kids that love the Lord and know how to hear God's voice and make wise decisions on their own.
Ooh, that's good.
Okay.
That's gold.
That's different than a valedictorian. That kid may be a valedictorian.
Or a major leaguer someday.
Yeah, or a college scholarship or whatever that
Yeah.
is. That may happen, but it's that we're gonna have to decide together that that's the direction God wants them to do. But for every one of them, I want them to love the Lord, to hear God's voice, and to make wise decisions.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a high standard.
For sure.
And I want them to function on their own. I mean, you know, I want that when parents or when other people see my kids, I want them to say, wow, there's a confidence about them. There's a belief system in them. And you know, not that it matters what the other parents say, but I mean, I'm just saying that I want, when they're in the world,
Yeah.
you know, I want them to be able to give that's the standard.
That's so good. Because I used to say, I want to raise up productive members of society, right?
And that's true too.
And I think that's good, but there's a higher aim.
Yeah.
Right. And that is that self-confident, wise, who seeks the Lord, because that's where all wisdom comes from. Yeah.
And so often you were talking about order. I think it's another thing that we use a lot is the word control. That what happens is, okay, let me give you another analogy. So let's think about our children being a horse. Okay.
All right.
So they're a horse, and every child that's made is a thoroughbred because God doesn't make junk. Are they the best athlete? It doesn't matter. Are they the smartest? Doesn't matter. It's really that God created everything uniquely. He gave them unique gifts. Every child is a thoroughbred. I mean, they are made for the adventure of God in their own unique way.
That's good.
Okay. So the world will say, You're a thoroughbred, and you need to think whatever you want to think. So go out into the world and frolic and think whatever you want and whatever you think is good. And if your parents think differently, they're mean.
And I'll carve a path for you, so no one will bother you.
Yes, exactly. And so everything, whatever you think is good, and you should be run by your thinking, feeling, whatever it is, and if you want to work hard, that's great. If you want to be this, you be that. If you want to,
we're on a roll now.
Okay. I was reading the other day. This is a hilarious story. So someone, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, but it's okay. So at a ball game, somebody brought an alligator as a pet, as a whatever the dogs, the support dog,
a support alligator.
They brought an alligator as a support alligator, and gosh. So the place said no. Yeah. We have a policy that says you can bring in support dogs, not support alligators.
Oh my gosh!
So everybody's mad about it. Everybody's all, no, she needs to have the right to have this support alligator in there. I mean,
so ridiculous.
Is that so? We're
living in insane
what's
times.
Right is wrong, and what's wrong is right. And,
yes.
and it is a very so. That's what society says. That's what's being sold to our kids.
Yep.
Okay, what we're selling them is. What we should be selling them is that you get under the bit and bridle of the Lord, and He is your rider. He is going to take you on an adventure. He's going to take you into battle. He's going to take you on an adventure that is so much better than frolicking out here in your own. There's so many dangers in that, and so God has the best way. He created the world. He's got the best for you. You surrender to the Lord, yes. And you run the adventure. Okay, now. That is adventure, and that is scary. That is so many things for a parent, because what the parent does instead, in my opinion, is he says, don't go out there in the world. Stay in the barn. Stay in the little arena here. This is safe, and we're under control, and we know what everything's done, and you can run here. It's okay. You just don't run very far, but you're going to run, and then you can jump, and we'll have these little things for you. We'll create all this for you. And I'm like, who's going to buy that?
Right.
I got this frolicking in the field and everything, but what I will buy is we're going on an adventure. Now I got to give up something to do it.
Yeah.
And I got to go God's ways to make it happen. But I want the adventure of life. I want to go down there.
That's good.
And I think that's where I say, well, we over control because we're scared.
Yep.
And we want to keep them in the barn and and then we wonder why they reject our way of teaching. Why they reject what we want for them.
Yeah. That's really good. Really good. I'm going to step back to one thing that you said, and that was, I was thinking about correct carefully, because so often I heard this just the other day out of a friend's mouth talking about he was having some trouble at home, and he was working on punishments. Like, I've got to punish my child. Right. And I think that word correct versus punish has intent behind it. What is the intention? Is the intention of punishment to have them suffer and pay their dues, or is it to correct so that they can do better next time?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things we talk about a lot is we value correction.
Yeah.
That please don't let your kids be brats. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, don't raise someone you can't stand to be with.
Nobody wants your kids. Nobody wants to be around your bratty kids. And it really is. I think though, when a kid sees the intent of the correction, and if it is, they see is mom or dad angry? Are they, and one of the things, our kids desperately want our approval. And so, it's easy for them to think that because of the enemy and his influence in their lives, it's easy for the enemy to take our criticism, our correction, and make it into more than it is. And encouragement tends to be, think about when somebody gives you a compliment. and you say, well, you really look good today. But man, I'm 59, I mean, I don't look that good. I mean, it's what we think
Right.
and or whatever, man, we tend to be self-critical.
For sure.
And so therefore it takes a lot of encouragement, and it takes, but correction is, and punishment is taken more harshly than even it is. Sometimes
That's so true.
Think about it in our marriage. I may say, something to my wife, and because the filter it goes through, it may be taken 5 times worse than I really meant it.
Right.
I mean it this much.
Wait, your wife misunderstands you sometimes?
Never. But yeah, we're so alike.
Yeah.
So, yeah, another podcast. But anyway, I think that when we got to be careful about punishment, because it's just, and I tell parents a lot, you can be firm without being angry.
Yeah.
You really can. You can be firm, and you can, and in fact,
you do have to calm down.
Yes, and let your yes be yes and your no be no. And people talk to us all the time about, I have to yell at my kids to be heard, and I'm like, you've trained them that way.
Yeah, that's right.
So often you train them that way, and you can speak softly and carry a big stick.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Don, this has been amazing. We've covered a lot of territory.
We
here.
have.
And so I know that you've got crazycoolfamily.com.
Yep, crazycoolfamily.com.
You've got a bunch of resources for folks. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you guys have and what might be beneficial for our audience?
Yeah, I'm going to go through a lot of resources, and then just hang on with me a minute, guys. And I want to come down to at the end to just a couple of things. My buddy who's a comedian says men are like 2 crickets playing racquetball up in their brains, that it's like, that we don't deal well with a lot of complication,
right.
And all the relational, all the conversation and things. But we're actually, when this podcast released, we will have a brand new website that is in the works that is going to be really amazing. Lots of different, so we just real quick, we have a book that you can buy. You can buy that through Amazon. The link's on the website. We're coming out with what we call micro books, which we have about 4 being released that are just short topical books. I'm super excited about.
For the caveman reader.
For the caveman, literally like 30-page books. You can read.
Perfect.
As my wife would say, in one bathroom sitting,
Yeah.
And so,
Perfect.
Yeah, so I love that. I mean, one of them is going to be about, creating, 5 keys to stop sibling fighting, overcoming anger, even a book on bedtime, which was, really a hassle in so many homes. More coming, but it's just, these are the first ones we're releasing. And then we've even got some family-oriented T-shirts. You can get them for Christmas. I mean, just
I love
so
your
many
shirt.
things. Yeah.
Family, God's idea.
Yeah,
I have one of those.
We are, and we're
wearing
going to have some different designs coming out, just family-themed T-shirts and things. But really, there is a free membership site on there too called Basecamp, which has we have basically some core courses. It's free. Basecamp's free, and you can go in and it's a free membership site. You can put it on your phone, your tablet. And we've got what I learned is that everybody wants short videos. And so these videos are 10 to 15 minutes a piece. And what they're going to do is to just instill in you some of those concepts about family vision and relationship development.
Oh, awesome.
Family vision, relationship development. That's the 2 things we do at Crazy Cool Family more than anything. We also have our own podcast, as you mentioned, and you can follow us on social media. But there's 2 things that as you leave here, and I hope we can put these in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put them in.
There is one. Go to the website, crazycoolfamily.com, and just peruse it. The website will help you navigate on how to go deeper with us. So that's one thing.
Yep.
The second thing, though, is specifically for men. We talked today about the Rubik's Cube and about how to do family relationships better. I am putting together an online event for men. It's in the works. It hasn't been released yet, so I'm not telling anybody about it yet. But all I want to do is do this. If you're interested, if you heard today, remember I told you the second most important thing you'll do is learn how to do family relationships. Love God, love others.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor. Let your most important neighbor be in your family. If that's resonated, you're talking about God speaking to your heart. If God has spoken to your heart and you feel this nudge and you say, I want to learn how to do family relationships better.
Yeah.
I want to make this a priority in my life. Okay, here's what you do. you email me, dads@crazycoolfamily.com. It'll be in the notes.
All right. Yep.
Dads, DADS, not one. We don't want just one dad. We want a lot of dads.
All the dads.
We want all the dads. Dads@crazycoolfamily.
We're better together, men.
Yes. And you just email me and say, I want in. You don't have to do that. And I'll have your email address and just say, I want in. And then I'll put you on an email list. We're going to launch this after the first of the year. So you got plenty of time. But just all you do is, so there's two things I want you to do. One of them is go to our website, crazycoolfamily.com, and just peruse it, check it out, see what all we're doing. Lots of new stuff happening there. Email me to dads@crazycoolfamily.com and just say, hey, I'm in.
That's awesome. And that's a nice offer because I know you speak at a lot of places. I'm just so grateful to have you on the podcast. You've brought so much gold here.
Thank you.
And I really want to encourage everybody. I know that Don's said some things that have really kind of made you think, I'm not doing that. I need to do that. How do I do that? Email.
Yeah.
dads@crazycoolfamily.com.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun event where it'll be over the first quarter of next year, and it'll be something that you can do online. It'll be super simple, but it'll be very, very effective in starting it. Just so you said it, we need to start on the journey of learning to do family relationships. How do we start?
Yeah.
This is your start. It's going to be super easy for you. And you and I are both testimonies of this. We have pursued family relationships with our kids for 30 years.
Yeah.
And today, it's the biggest blessing in our lives.
Absolutely spot on.
They're not perfect.
No.
I mean,
but we just had
learning.
a family. We went out as a family, 17 of us.
Yeah.
Because it's the spouses and everything now. And everybody had a blast.
Right.
And it's like, that just doesn't happen.
It's worth it. It is something that that is the enemy wants to distract you from it.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. And if you hear anything today in this podcast we just did, hear that other than your salvation, the best thing you'll do is pursue your family relationships, and we're here to help you.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thank you for watching, and thank you for being a dad. We love you, and get in dad mode. Thanks, Don.
You bet.